Welcome to a special edition of BBC Points West with Alex Lovell and David Garmston.
Our main story tonight, meningitis under the microscope. These young people in Bristol could hold the key to wiping out one strain of the illness as they take part in a new study.
If we can show that by immunising the teenagers, we don't just stop them getting sick, but we stop everyone else getting sick too, that changes the sums completely.
It comes exactly 30 years after the outbreak around Stroud, which claimed 7 young lives and terrified the community.
It's here in Stroud, in the district, in Stonehouse and in the old district, that the experts and analysts want to get and find out exactly what it is.
Well, those events in Gloucestershire inspired a charity which has raised millions. We're talking to one of the founders.
But there's more to do, and tonight we're dedicating our programme to an illness which can take young lives in hours.
Good evening. Tonight we can reveal that senior doctors have started a unique study in Bristol which could change the way we vaccinate against a potentially fatal disease still killing hundreds: meningitis.
Last year, the UK became the first country in the world to immunise babies against meningitis B. But some are now questioning if this is the right approach and if there's a more effective way to protect everyone.
Our health correspondent Matthew Hill has the latest on the research.
Izzy was a very loving person. She was always happy no matter what. If the vaccine was available today, then she probably still would have been alive.
I hope that these vaccine trials do some good for medical research.
I think we should keep her memory alive still.
These sixth formers have just cycled from Scotland to Bristol to raise £4,000 in memory of their friend and classmate. Izzy Gentry was studying hard for her AS-level exams when she fell ill. Posting on her Twitter account, she said she was being rushed to hospital. Blood tests revealed she had meningitis. But these sixth formers at St Mary Redcliffe have just started a study to find out if it's worth vaccinating teenagers against meningitis B. It's hoped that 1,500 16 to 18-year-olds will be having the vaccination, but they'll also be having one of these, a throat swab, as well as a spit test to see what effect the jab has on the carriage of meningitis.
Of course, those cases are devastating and seem well worth preventing to the people who are affected. But it is an issue of money. And if the money is spent on that vaccine, then it's not being spent on something else. If we can show that by immunising the teenagers, we don't just stop them getting sick, but we stop everyone else getting sick too, that changes the sums completely.
2 years ago, Professor Finn led another study in Bristol that found 1 in 10 teenagers carry the meningitis B bug, but some are far more infectious than others. It's hoped the spit samples will shed light on just how effective the new vaccine is at reducing the threat of transmission.
So this study is going to be vital in informing the national study, the larger national study, by helping government to decide exactly how to carry that study out, which is why Meningitis Research Foundation is so excited to be part of it and funding it.
And that information could spare more young lives, like Izzy's. Matthew Hill, BBC Points West, Bristol.
Meningitis has been called the silent killer. It attacks the lining around the brain and spinal cord, and it can kill within hours. It can affect anyone, but babies, teenagers and young adults are most at risk.
It's usually caused by a viral or bacterial infection. Bacterial is sometimes deadly.
Every year here in the UK, there are around 3,200 cases. Of those, 320 people, so that's about 10%, will die, and a further 960 will suffer life-changing complications.
B, C, W and Y are the main types which cause the disease here in the UK, but meningitis B is by far the most common. It was 30 years ago that meningitis came to frightening prominence here in the West. In one part of Gloucestershire, case after case of meningitis B appeared in the Stroud area. In just 5 years, there were 65 cases. That was 5 times higher than normally expected, and it was officially designated an outbreak in 1982. 7 people died, nearly all of them children and teenagers.
The disease seemed to travel through the district. Nailsworth was affected in 1982 and 1983. One secondary school there had 5 cases in just 2 years. In 1983 and 4, Stroud became the main focus, and then in 1985 and 1986, it attacked Stonehouse with a vengeance. Amanda Parr has been looking back.
In the town of Stroud in Gloucestershire, another baby has contracted meningitis.
The Stroud area of Gloucestershire has been in the grip of a meningitis epidemic for 5 years.
They've been called the meningitis years. More than 120 cases through the 80s, nearly all of them children and teenagers, and 7 deaths. Families were frantic.
For people with children living all around the Stroud district, these were dark and worrying times. They didn't feel they had enough information. They didn't know whether to believe the wild speculation about how all this may have started and how it was spreading. There was intense fear of an illness which could take hold so quickly and devastate so completely.
Stonehouse had a high concentration of cases. When the junior health minister came to visit, concerns were made abundantly clear.
All we hear is every stone is being turned to find out. Well, it's obviously not, because we've not got a damn answer, have we?
You know, the estate agents were complaining that people didn't want to buy houses once they knew it was in the Stroud area. Our swimming gala were told they could not swim with any other people because no one knew how it was spread, and everyone just shut down.
For the Wells family, things could have been so different. Daniel, now proud father to Daisy, was one of those struck. His mum Jane remembers the dash to the hospital.
You know, really, really poorly, and we were so frightened. And I remember getting there and they didn't know who we were. I was just screaming at them, please take this baby, please take this baby. It was horrendous. I can't tell you how horrendous. Even now, 30 years on, it brings tears to my eyes.
Daniel fought back and survived. Jane says he felt the effects for years. Tim Fear was another young boy who fell victim. He shows his gratitude now by raising money to help with research and support.
It's the seriousness that hits home really when I read the newspaper article of my mum living a nightmare and in hospital while they were sort of pumping penicillin into him. That's the sort of scary thing. This isn't something that's gone away. Thankfully, awareness is much sort of greater now, 30 odd years on, but it's still very much there.
Did you usually keep his bedroom window open in the winter?
With so little understood about the outbreak, the authorities decided to carry out a huge research study in Stonehouse. They checked throat bacteria, did blood tests, and asked questions of 6,000 local people.
You can have a healthy child who's perfectly well and dead within 12 hours. So, it's not surprising that people were frightened. Even if we can't do anything with a vaccine, then we can help with communicating what we do know and helping people know the signs and symptoms. So that, to me, was one of the major lessons. And, this was the start of a major drive towards research into new vaccines.
The meningitis support group have been meticulous not to give medical advice because it can be misleading.
From the meningitis years, there also grew a powerful charitable force as parents fundraised for research, built awareness and supported each other. Today, Meningitis Now is a large and successful national charity, and Jane has been heavily involved from the start.
We were saying this is an outbreak here and it's unfortunate, but let's do something good with it. Let's get researchers in, let's learn from it so that other people can benefit from it.
And Daisy, a much cherished granddaughter, has also become a symbol of everything they fought for.
She's living proof that actually if you fight long and hard enough, good things happen in the end. So, Daisy was the first to get the meningitis B vaccine. She's sitting here, larger than life, and we won't have that terrible worry.
A young life protected in the ongoing fight against this cruel and unpredictable illness. Amanda Parr, BBC Points West.
I remember it. It was a nightmare. And 30 years on, today is the official birthday of the Stroud-based charity Meningitis Now. And today, its executive founder and veteran fundraiser, Steve Damon, completed an arduous 17-day-long walk, finishing in Stonehouse.
Steve, a former boss of a lorry company, has dedicated much of his life to campaign for research and awareness about the disease since his own baby son, Spencer, died from meningitis in 1982.
His latest challenge has raised more than £50,000, and even though 30 years have passed, the work continues because meningitis still claims and changes lives.
Yes, here are the stories of two young men, 16-year-old Ryan from Bristol, who died from meningitis, and 20-year-old Matt from Trowbridge in Wiltshire, who survived but whose life would never be the same again.
31st of March 2010 is a day I will never forget.
On February 14th, 2010, my life and body changed, and I had to adapt.
Ryan was a fit, healthy, vibrant, his whole life ahead of him. Watching Man United with his dad, went to bed, he was sick. I went out to get a few bits and pieces. We were laughing and joking. There was nothing to alarm me not to leave him. I know him better than anybody else, and I left him.
I woke up to him sort of crying out for help, and it sort of like he was in quite a lot of pain. The only option really was to call the ambulance. It was the slowest 5 minutes I have ever endured.
So I was just laying on this couch, just feeling ill and just not feeling myself. And then the next thing I remember, my dad came in to check on me, and he noticed I had the rash.
They were very good at the hospital, recognised straight away meningitis. Eventually his lungs were giving up, his heart was giving up, and we were basically taken to a room to say the next 24 hours was crucial. Me and my husband, we didn't think the worst case scenario. We just thought he'd be better, he'd be fine, he's strong.
So I remember coming home, getting out of hospital, and a 16-year-old had lost their fight to meningitis. And I just thought I was extremely lucky to get through it.
The paramedics were amazing, and they did take him to the BRI, but there was nothing that could be done for him.
I saw both mum and dad almost collapse into each other, and I was sort of stood there just watching the whole thing, almost like a fly on the wall.
Our family knew nothing. They didn't know he was ill. The first time we spoke to them was to say that he had died. How do you tell anybody that?
Because I can't remember looking at my hands thinking, what's happened? I lost tips of almost every finger except for my middle and thumb. But I could still press the shutter, so I could still take pictures.
We had to do something about it. So we quickly started with the charity events, and it kind of feels that we're not letting him down, are we? That we're carrying on. He's just not here.
Your heart goes out to them, doesn't it? Well, as we heard at the start of tonight's programme, doctors are still considering the best way to protect everyone against meningitis B. Now every baby is immunised free on the NHS. So far, this move has cut the number of cases in half amongst those given the jab. But discussions continue around the other big at-risk group, teenagers. As Dickon Hooper reports, some parents are so concerned they're paying privately for vaccinations.
I think it's actually left me stronger as a person overall. Obviously it was such a terrible ordeal to go through.
A remarkable statement from Millie Reynolds. Just 4 months ago, the teenager was in a week-long induced coma. she'd been rushed to hospital after being taken very ill very quickly, the day after her prom.
Even by the time that the ambulance had got here, she said to me, my vision is going, and at that point it was one of those moments where you just can't quite believe it's happening. And
it was terrifying, wasn't it, really?
Awful.
And at one point, they thought they might lose her.
You are essentially thinking, oh my God, is this happening?
Did you think she was going to die?
I think we were, both of us, really, maybe at that stage thinking it was a possibility, but trying not to let it enter our minds, I think. I think for me, probably, as the day went on, possibly more so. And as we had consultations with the doctors over those first 2 days, it was a real possibility. So we were really, at that stage, just totally terrified.
But Millie's parents know they're lucky. Their daughter survived meningitis B, an experience that has changed them. Both their sons have now been vaccinated privately at a cost of almost £300 each.
The risk is relatively small, statistically small, but I think, the fact that we've been through this and we can do something about it, and we're fortunate enough to be able to pay for it, for us really it's a decision that we've got to go with, really.
We'd pay anything for Millie not to have suffered as she did. So for us it was, and I would just say to everybody, get your child vaccinated, because nobody wants to see their child suffer the way that Millie did.
The only people to be offered the Men B vaccine for free on the NHS are babies. That's part of our routine immunisation programme now, and we're the first country in Europe to do that. But if Men B is so dangerous, how do you decide who gets it for free and who pays for it privately? This man should know. He attends the high-level committee advising the government on immunisation. So couldn't we all just get the vaccine?
Well, we could, but the cost of that would be very high.
It's not just about cost effectiveness. They also look at how the vaccine actually works and balance the risk of getting ill against the consequences.
None of these decisions are easy, and somebody's always going to be, a loser in some sense. Some special interest group will lose out to some extent to another one. Overall, the overall impact ought to be that we get as much health as we possibly can from our tax pound that we pay into the NHS.
Millie and her family want to thank that NHS for giving her the chance to live each day to the full.
I was so determined to get out of hospital towards the end, and since then I've done so many amazing things. I went on holiday with my family, I've been on holiday with my friends multiple times, and I'm so determined now to just live my life as best as I can.
Dickon Hooper, BBC Points West.
Well, joining us now in the studio to discuss meningitis are Dr. Giolenta Bonatonia, who's a consultant paediatrician in infectious diseases at the Bristol Children's Hospital, and fresh from his walk that we heard about, Steve Damon, the executive founder of the Gloucestershire-based charity Meningitis Now. Welcome to you both. Doctor, let's start with you. Let's just get this into some sort of perspective. An average GP, how many cases is he likely to see of meningitis B per year?
Well, it's a difficult question. So we probably see about 800 cases of meningitis B in the UK per year. So maybe 1 or 2 cases.
So it is rare, isn't it? I think that's the point I wanted to get across. Now, the trouble with meningitis is that its symptoms seem quite similar to flu or just a cold, really, and yet it's lethal. Is there a red flag, anything that you could say to parents, look out for this?
Well, the initial symptoms can be very non-specific and very similar to the symptoms of flu, such as fever, bad headaches, vomiting, loss of appetite, and general feeling of being unwell. And after the initial symptoms, you might experience some neck stiffness, rash, some confusion, excessive sleepiness, and in more severe cases, reduced level of consciousness or even convulsions. I think what's the most difficult thing is to recognize symptoms in babies, because they tend to present with very non-specific symptoms, such as poor feeding, vomiting, a very unusual cry or moaning, pale blotchy skin with rash, with temperatures or without, and they can appear very lethargic, very floppy, can be less responsive, and in severe cases they can have seizures. So it's difficult thing is that at the beginning they will present with very non-specific.
And it's quite difficult for GPs to tell, isn't it? Let alone parents.
It is difficult. So the advice is, if you are concerned about someone who might have meningitis, who is ill, who is getting worse, trust your instincts and don't wait for the rash. Get medical help. Just check. Okay. How are you feeling after your walk?
A little bit tired, yeah.
It's 30 years since you lost your lad Spencer. A lot has happened since then in this fight, hasn't it?
It certainly has. You know, in those days, there wasn't any charities, no leaflets, and it was just, you know, families and friends. And then the Stroud Meningitis Support Group was set up during the Stonehouse outbreak. But yes, we've now got 5 vaccines in the programme, and the charity Meningitis Now, who I represent, we've financially supported over 3,000 families. We've invested £12 million. We were instrumental in the introduction of the vaccines. So, up and down the country, families have
I think your lad would be
together.
very proud of what's come out of his tragedy.
Yes, I truly believe he would be. Yes, it changed our lives completely.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's very proud of what we've achieved.
What's your thinking about the vaccinations at the moment? I mean, you campaign for babies to have it. Now there's possibility of teenagers having it as well. What do you think?
Well, first of all, we wanted and we're still campaigning for the vaccine to be broadened to cover the under 5s, because that's the highest age group where we see the highest incidence.
Yeah.
And, we want the adolescent study that was recommended at the same time as the MenB vaccine. We want more urgency, and from the Department of Health to get on with the programme that's been recommended.
In a word or two, how close are we to actually defeating this awful illness for good?
Well, the initial results are very successful. So since the introduction of MenB vaccine 12 months ago, the number of cases in eligible babies halved. So that's great success, and the vaccine is working very well. So how close to eradicating is probably a difficult question to answer yet. We need to still wait for some study results to come.
Okay. Thank you both very much indeed for coming in this evening. Thank you.